There is a moment, usually lasting no longer than 0.3 of a second, where the human mind fractures. It is the precise instant between a traumatic event and the emotional reaction to it. A car crash before the scream, a betrayal before the heartbreak, a knife entering skin before the pain registers. In that 0.3 of a second, you are technically dead. Your ego has not yet caught up to reality. You exist in a vacuum, a void. Most people spend their entire lives terrified of this void. They fill it with noise, with relationships, with addiction, with hope. They do everything possible to bridge the gap between cause and effect, so they never have to sit in the silence of their own destruction. But there is a specific subset of the human population, perhaps 1 in 10,000, who has learned to live inside that fracture. They have learned to stretch that 0.3 of a second into an eternity. They do not react, they do not flinch. When their world burns, they do not reach for water. They watch the flames with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen. This is not bravery. Bravery is acting in spite of fear. This is something far colder, something darker. It is the psychological amputation of the vulnerability reflex. Consider the case of Subject 89, a designation we will use to protect the identity of a former deep cover operative whose psychological profile was declassified in a data leak in 2014. Subject 89 was placed in a confinement box for 42 days. No light, no sound. Irregular feeding schedules designed to break the circadian rhythm. The objective of his captors was simple: induce psychosis through sensory deprivation. It is a biological inevitability. The brain, starved of input, will begin to cannibalize itself, hallucinating monsters to fill the silence. Most men break in 72 hours. Subject 89 lasted 42 days. When they finally pulled him out, the interrogators were waiting for the trembling, the weeping, the incoherent rambling of a broken mind. Instead, Subject 89 looked at the lead interrogator, checked his own pulse, and asked for a glass of water. His heart rate was 45 beats per minute. He wasn't broken. He was bored. How is this possible? How does a biological organism overwrite millions of years of evolutionary survival instinct that screams for comfort and connection? The interrogators later found that Subject 89 hadn't been waiting for rescue. He hadn't been praying. He hadn't been thinking about his family. He had been building a castle. In his mind, brick by brick, he constructed a fortress. He retreated so deep into the recesses of his own consciousness that the physical sensation of hunger and darkness became nothing more than data points. The body is hungry, he told himself, not I am hungry. This linguistic shift seems trivial. It is not. It is the key to the ultimate psychological superpower. It is the difference between suffering and observation. It is the dark application of an ancient philosophy that has been sanitized and sold to you as a self-help tool for productivity. You know it as Stoicism, but you have been sold the light version, the palatable version, the version that tells you to journal in the morning and be grateful for your coffee. Real Stoicism, the kind practiced by men who walked into their own executions without blinking, is not about happiness. It is not about peace. It is about becoming untouchable. It is about becoming a ghost in your own life so that nothing can ever hurt you again. But there is a cost. If you sever the nerve that feels pain, you also sever the nerve that feels joy. If you build a wall high enough to keep the enemy out, you also trap yourself inside. Over the next 40 minutes, we are not going to discuss how to be happier. We are going to dismantle the human emotional response system. We are going to look at the clinical architecture of detachment. We are going to explore the terrifying efficiency of the gray rock method when weaponized by high-functioning Machiavellians. We are going to solve the mystery of Subject 89, because the truth is, he didn't use a secret military technique. He used a cognitive reframe available to anyone watching this video. He flipped a switch that exists in your brain right now. The question you need to ask yourself isn't, can I flip the switch? The question is, once you turn the lights off, will you ever be able to turn them back on? To understand the mechanism of this dark emotional alchemy, we must first look at a specific incident in 1965 involving a U.S. Navy Vice Admiral named James Stockdale. But we aren't going to look at it through the lens of heroism. We are going to look at it through the lens of neurobiology. Stockdale is shot down over Vietnam. He is imprisoned in the Hanoi Hilton. He is tortured repeatedly. His legs are broken. He is kept in isolation. Now, observe the behavior of the other prisoners around him. There were the optimists. These were the men who said, "We will be out by Christmas." Christmas would come and go.
Then they would say, "We will be out by Easter." Easter would come and go. And then they died. They didn't die of starvation. They didn't die of wounds. They died of a broken heart. Clinically, this is known as psychogenic death. The brain, exhausted by the cycle of high dopamine expectation, followed by the crash of reality, simply shuts down the autonomic nervous system. Hope, in this context, is a neurotoxin. Stockdale survived because he killed hope. He accepted he might never leave. He embraced the darkness. He looked at the torture not as a temporary aberration, but as his new permanent reality. By accepting the worst-case scenario as the baseline, he became immune to disappointment. This is the Stockdale Paradox, but in the underworld of dark psychology, it is known as the zero-point calibration. Imagine your emotional state is a pendulum. It swings from happiness to sadness, from excitement to fear. Most people try to push the pendulum toward the positive side. They chase the high. But physics dictates that the further you swing to the right, the harder you will eventually swing to the left. The dark Stoic stops the pendulum. He grabs it with an iron grip and holds it in the center, the 0 point. He feels nothing when he wins. He feels nothing when he loses. To the outside world, this looks like sociopathy. And indeed, the behavioral output is almost identical. But the internal mechanism is different. A sociopath lacks the hardware to feel empathy. The dark Stoic has the hardware, but he has written a software override to bypass it. This is where the danger lies. If you are negotiating with a person who uses this calibration, you will lose. You will lose because you are playing a game of leverage, and they have removed all the levers. You cannot threaten a man who has already accepted his own destruction. You cannot bribe a man who has no desire for pleasure. You become invisible to him. And being invisible to your opponent is the most terrifying position to be in. We see this dynamic play out in high-stakes corporate takeovers, in elite poker rooms, and in the interrogation of serial killers. Watch the footage of a predator being questioned. Often they go still, reptilian. They don't fidget, they don't defend. They wait. They are utilizing the power of the void. Humans are social creatures. We crave reciprocity. If I smile, you smile. If I get angry, you react. If I ask a question, you feel a compulsion to answer. The dark Stoic breaks this contract. You scream, they look at you. You cry, they look at you. You threaten, they look at you. They offer you the void. And because you are terrified of the silence, you start to fill it. You start talking, you start revealing your insecurities. You project your own fears onto their blank canvas. They are not doing anything to you. You are destroying yourself again.
Their shield. This is the psychological equivalent of a black hole. It exerts gravity without expending energy. But how do you build this shield? How do you take a mind that is wired for anxiety and rewire it for ice? It starts with a concept the ancient Greeks called apatheia, not apathy in the modern sense of laziness, but the eradication of passions. To the Stoic, an emotion is not a fact. It is a false judgment. You insulted me is a fact. I am hurt by your insult is a judgment. The dark Stoic deletes the judgment. But to do this effectively, to become truly untouchable, requires a descent into what Jung called the shadow. You must visit the darkest corners of your own psyche and make friends with the monsters there. You must visualize your own death, the death of your loved ones, the loss of your reputation, the failure of your life's work. You must visualize these things so vividly, so frequently, that they lose their sting. This is premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Most people use visualization to imagine success. The dark Stoic uses it to inoculate themselves against tragedy. They mentally live in the worst-case scenario every single day, so when reality hits, it feels like a relief. But here is the twist. Here is the trap I warned you about. When you practice premeditatio malorum long enough, you begin to detach from the people you love. You look at your partner and you see a future corpse. You look at your child and you see potential loss. You protect yourself from the pain of losing them by emotionally letting them go before they are even gone. You become a fortress, secure, impregnable, and utterly alone. In the next 30 minutes, we are going to open the blueprints of this fortress. We are going to analyze the historical figures who perfected this art, from the Roman emperor who ruled while his children died, to the modern political fixers who operate in the shadows of Washington and Moscow. We will dissect the citadel of the inner mind. We will learn the view from above technique that minimizes all human drama into insignificance. And we will examine the neuroscience of cortisol suppression.
But remember the mystery of Subject 89. He survived the box, he beat the interrogators, he walked out into the sunlight a free man. But 3 years later, Subject 89 was found in his apartment staring at a blank wall. He hadn't spoken to anyone in months. He hadn't opened his mail. He had starved to death with a refrigerator full of food. He had become so good at suppressing his needs, so perfect at conquering his biological impulses, that he eventually conquered the impulse to live. He didn't commit suicide. He simply forbade to exist. This is the danger of the vault. Once you lock the door, you have to remember where you put the key. Let us begin the analysis. The architecture of the dark Stoic mind is built on 3 pillars: the dichotomy of control, the suppression of the amygdala, and the weaponization of indifference. To understand the first pillar, we must strip away the romance of philosophy. The dichotomy of control states that there are things up to us and things not up to us. Up to us, our perception, our intention, our will. Not up to us, everything else. Your reputation, your health, your wealth, the actions of others. The average person invests 90% of their emotional energy in the not up to us category. They scream at traffic. They agonize over what their boss thinks. They doom scroll through news of wars they cannot stop. This is an energy leak. It is a hemorrhage of power. The dark Stoic seals this leak. He withdraws 100% of his emotional capital from the external world and reinvests it solely in his own cognitive processes. This sounds liberating, but applied clinically, it looks like cold-blooded ruthlessness. If you are firing an employee and you are a normal, empathetic human, you feel their pain. You hesitate, you soften the blow, you carry the guilt.
At home, the dark Stoic views the firing as an external event. The employee's reaction is not up to him. The employee's poverty is not up to him. His only concern is, did I execute the procedure correctly? Did I act with reason? If the answer is yes, he feels 0 guilt. He sleeps soundly while the other man ruins his life. This detachment allows for decision-making that is terrifyingly efficient. It is the psychology of the surgeon who cuts into flesh without wincing. If the surgeon felt the pain of the patient, his hand would shake. He must objectify the patient. He must turn the human into meat to save the life. The dark Stoic turns the entire world into meat. This leads us to the biological mechanism, the amygdala hijack. The amygdala is the lizard brain. It detects threats. When someone insults you, your amygdala lights up. It floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate spikes. Your prefrontal cortex, the logical, reasoning part of your brain, goes offline. You become stupid. You become reactive. When you are reactive, you are controllable. If I can make you angry, I own you. If I can make you afraid, I own you. The dark Stoic trains to sever the link between the amygdala and the reaction. This is not repression. Repression is feeling the anger and bottling it up until you explode. That is weak. This is cognitive reframing. When the insult comes, the dark Stoic pauses. He dissects the insult. He looks at the source. This person is insulting me. Why? Because they are insecure. They are projecting. They are a biological machine reacting to their own trauma. Their noise has nothing to do with me. By analyzing the threat, he neutralizes it. The amygdala fires, but the signal is intercepted before it reaches the motor cortex. There is a historical precedent for this training: the Spartans. We think of Spartans as warriors, but their primary training was in endurance of discomfort. They were beaten and told not to cry out. They were starved and told not to beg. They were teaching the brain that pain is information, not a command. Now apply this to modern social dynamics. You are in a negotiation. The other side throws a tantrum. They threaten to walk away. They slam the table. The average person panics. They offer a concession to keep the peace. The dark Stoic observes the tantrum. He sees it as a theatrical performance. He checks his pulse. He waits. He says nothing. He utilizes the gray rock method. The gray rock method is a technique often taught to victims of narcissists, but here it is an offensive weapon. You become as uninteresting, as unreactive, and as solid as a gray rock. You provide no narcissistic supply, no drama, no fear, no anger. When the aggressor realizes their tactics are not working, they begin to unravel. They escalate, they become sloppy, they reveal their hand. The dark Stoic watches, and when the opponent has exhausted themselves, the dark Stoic strikes, not with anger, but with precision. This is the martial art of the mind, Aikido, using the opponent's energy against them. But let's go deeper. Let's look at the Citadel. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, wrote about the Inner Citadel, a place inside the mind that no external force can breach. To build this citadel, you must practice a form of mental compartmentalization that borders on dissociative identity disorder. You must create a version of yourself that is the observer.
The observer does not participate in your life, it watches your life. When you are eating, the observer watches you eat. When you are having sex, the observer watches the act. When you are grieving, the observer analyzes the tears. This separation creates a buffer zone. It allows you to operate in high-stress environments without burnout. It is the secret of high-performing CEOs, special forces operators, and yes, successful psychopaths. But the line between disciplined detachment and pathological dissociation.
Stoicism is razor thin. In 1992, a study was conducted on Wall Street traders. They measured their cortisol levels and their financial returns. The most successful traders were not the smartest math whizzes. They were the ones who had the lowest emotional reaction to loss. They were functional psychopaths. They could lose $10 million in a morning and go to lunch with a steady hand. They didn't dwell on the sunk cost. They lived entirely in the present moment. This brings us to the darkest intersection of Stoicism, the intersection with Machiavellianism. Stoicism was intended to be a philosophy of virtue, justice, courage, wisdom, temperance. It was about being a good citizen. But if you strip away the virtue and keep the methods, you have a terrifying weapon. A dark Stoic uses the techniques of emotional control not to serve the greater good, but to serve their own interests. They use their calm to unsettle others. They use their silence to manipulate. They use their lack of empathy to make hard decisions that benefit them at the expense of others. They become the untouchable. Consider the political figure Talleyrand. He survived the French Revolution, the reign of Napoleon, and the restoration of the monarchy. Heads were rolling in the streets. Governments were collapsing. Talleyrand remained in power through it all. How? He had no allegiance to ideology. He had no emotional attachment to any king or emperor. He was attached only to reality. He adapted. He flowed like water. He was never rigid, so he could never be broken. He practiced the art of amor fati, the love of fate. But in the dark interpretation, amor fati is not about loving what happens. It is about exploiting what happens. The government has collapsed? Good. Chaos is a ladder. The market has crashed? Good. Assets are cheap. I have been betrayed? Good. Now I know who my enemies are. This relentless reframing turns every tragedy into a tactical advantage. You become anti-fragile. The more you are attacked, the stronger you get. However, we must address the physiology of the cold gaze. When you look at someone who has mastered this, you notice something about their eyes. They don't dart around, they don't seek approval. This is the predatory gaze. In the animal kingdom, prey animals have eyes on the sides of their heads to scan for danger. Predators have eyes on the front of their heads for focus. Anxious people scan. They look for threats. They check facial expressions to see if they are safe. The dark Stoic focuses. He does not scan for danger because he has accepted that danger is inevitable. He is not looking for safety. He is looking for leverage. When you adopt this gaze, holding eye contact just a fraction of a second longer than is socially comfortable, you trigger a primal response in the person across from you. Their subconscious registers you as a predator. You don't have to say a word. Your biology is communicating dominance. But let's pause. We need to look at the collateral damage. We established early on that Subject 89 died of apathy, but there are living casualties of this philosophy as well. When you become a dark Stoic, you become difficult to love. Love requires vulnerability. It requires you to give someone the power to hurt you. It requires you to hand them a knife and trust them not to use it. The dark Stoic never hands over the knife. He can simulate love, he can perform the actions of a partner, a father, a friend, but behind the citadel walls, the drawbridge is up. He analyzes his wife's complaints as external noise. He manages his children's emotions like a bomb disposal technician manages explosives, carefully but behind a blast shield. He is safe, but he is sterile. This is the tragic irony of the untouchable state. You achieve total freedom from pain, but you imprison yourself in a solitary confinement of your own making. Let's look at the view from above technique, a classic.
Stoic meditation. You imagine yourself floating above the earth. You see your city, then your country, then the planet. You see the armies of the past marching and dying. You see the rise and fall of empires. The goal is to realize how small your problems are, to crush your ego. But if you do this too well, you crush your meaning. If nothing matters, if we are all just dust in the wind, then why bother? Why get out of bed? Why fight for anything? Nihilism is the shadow twin of Stoicism. The dark Stoic walks a tightrope over the abyss of nihilism. He uses the meaninglessness of the world to detach from anxiety,
but he must generate his own artificial meaning to keep moving forward. He plays the game. He views life not as a journey, but as a strategy game. The objective is not happiness. The objective is mastery. The objective is to play the hand perfectly, regardless of the cards. This gamification of life allows for extreme risk-taking. If you view money as just points in the game, you can bet it all. If you view reputation as just a stat, you can risk it for a higher goal. This is why so many high-level operatives, spies, and elite criminals gravitate towards this philosophy. It allows them to function in the red zone, where normal human psychology disintegrates. Now, let's discuss the tactical application of negative visualization in the digital age. We live in an era of dopamine addiction. Likes, comments, notifications. We are wired to seek constant validation. This makes us fragile. One negative comment can ruin your day. The dark Stoic practices voluntary discomfort. He deliberately exposes himself to cold, to hunger, to ridicule. He trains his brain to operate in low dopamine environments. By fasting, he conquers the hunger impulse. By taking cold showers, he conquers the shock response. By deliberately putting himself in socially awkward situations, he conquers the shame response. This is callousing the mind, as David Goggins puts it. But the dark Stoic goes further. He calluses the heart. He teaches himself that empathy is a bias. Empathy makes you care more about the person in front of you than the person 1,000 miles away. It is irrational. The dark Stoic replaces empathy with rational compassion, or often just rationality. I will not help you because you are crying. I will help you only if it aligns with the objective. This is the logic of the machine. As we near the end of this analysis, we must return to the concept of the switch, the open loop I gave you at the beginning. Can you flip it? And if you do, can you return? The answer lies in neuroplasticity. The brain changes based on what you feed it. If you spend 10 years suppressing your emotions, viewing people as variables, and visualizing catastrophe, your brain will physically change. The neural pathways for empathy will atrophy. The pathways for logical analysis will strengthen. You will become what you practice. You can flip the switch. You can become the person who doesn't blink in a crisis. You can become the person who walks away from a heartbreak without shedding a tear. You can become untouchable. But you cannot simply flip the switch back when you want to feel the warmth of a Christmas morning or the genuine connection of a lover's touch. You will feel it through a filter. You will observe yourself feeling it. You will be the captain of a ship that never sinks, sailing on an ocean of ice. Subject 89 survived the box because he became the box. He became empty, and the emptiness consumed him. The ultimate lesson of the dark psychology of Stoicism is not that you should avoid it. It is that you should respect it as you respect a loaded firearm. It is a tool for survival in extreme conditions. Use it when the world is burning. Use it when you are in the trenches. Use it when you are under attack. But do not bring the war home. The goal is not to be a stone. The goal is to be a warrior who can
The warrior of the shield, but who also knows when to put it down. Because if you hold the shield for too long, your arm will fuse to it, and you will find that while nothing can touch you, you can touch nothing. And that is a fate far worse than pain. This is the Psychology Vault. The analysis is complete. The door is closing. End of transmission.